Your lesson objective for 8 is I will understand the function of parentheses and apply to solving problems. So what that means is we're going to be working with parentheses and equations, and we're going to understand what those parentheses mean whenever we're looking at them in an equation and whenever we're solving problems. Okay, so I want you to look at the problem to the left side of the page first. Richard has 3 cartons with 6 eggs in each. As he opens the cartons, he drops 2 eggs. How many unbroken eggs does Richard have left? So over here to the right, you see that I have an array. I have 3 rows with 6 in each row because Richard has 3 cartons with 6 eggs in each carton. And then I took a line and I crossed out 2 of my circles in the array. And that represents how he dropped 2 of his eggs. So, you see that I have 2 equations that can be used to solve that application problem. The first one that we had to solve was 3 times 6 because that told me how many eggs he had in all, and that gave me 18. So if I have 18 eggs and he dropped 2 of them, then I would have to do 18 minus 2, and that would give me 16. So the 16 is going to tell me how many eggs that he has left. So we want to take both of those equations and just make one equation out of it. So right down here is how we would do that. 3 times 6, and I have 3 times 6 in parentheses, and then you take 2 away from that. Okay, so whenever you're looking at this equation, 3 times 6 minus 2, you've got to ask yourself, do I need to multiply first or do I need to subtract first, and does it matter if I do one or the other first? So we need to find out. We're going to solve this equation twice. The first time that we solve it, we're going to subtract, and then the second time that we solve it, we're going to multiply. So on your board, I want you to start with 6 minus 2, find that answer, and then we're going to multiply that by 3 because that is what we have left over. So push pause to do that. So when I solve 6 minus 2, that gives me 4. And then the only thing I have left from that equation is the 3 and the multiplication symbol. So 3 times 4, and whenever we solve 3 times 4, we know that it is 12. So when I solved this equation using subtraction first, I got left with 12. So looking over here at the array, how many eggs does this man have left after he dropped 2? And we solved that in the beginning, and we knew that he had 16 eggs left. But whenever I solve this equation using subtraction first, I only get that he has 12 left. So you have to ask yourself, does that answer our question? And it does not, because it needs to be 16, and this way we got 12. So now we're going to go and we're going to solve the equation by multiplying 3 times 6 first and then subtracting 2 from that, and let's see if that gives us 16. So push pause to solve 3 times 6 and then take 2 away from that, and let's see if we can get 16 as our answer. So when I take 3 times 6, that does give me 18, and then when I do 18 minus 2, it equals 16. So what I want you to understand from this is that whenever you see the parentheses, that is the equation that you need to do first. So parentheses do matter whenever we're talking about math because that's the first step that you need to take. If you did not do those parentheses first, then our answer was wrong. Okay, moving on to the next one, I want you to write this equation on your board and make sure you use the parentheses in your equation. 4 plus 2 times 6. Push pause if you need to write it. So you have to ask yourself, what is the sum of 4 plus 2? Remember, the word sum means the answer to an addition equation. So 4 plus 2 equals what? I want you to write that down. And then what do we have left from the equation? 6 times 6 is what you should have now, because we took the 4 and the 2 together and that made 6. And I want you to notice that our parentheses are gone now. We did the 4 plus 2, so we don't have to include the parentheses anymore. So now all we need to do is find the answer to 6 times 6, and that will tell us what 4 plus 2 times 6 is. So I want you to write that answer on your board. So 6 times 6 is equal to 36. Okay, moving on to the next equation. Make sure your board is ready. This time we don't start the equation with parentheses. They're at the end. So make sure you have this equation written on your board like you see it on here. And we're not starting with 15 minus 12 because we have to start with what is in the parentheses. So we're going to start with 12 divided by 3. So I want you to write down the answer to 12 divided by 3, and then write what you have left of this equation. So we knew that 12 divided by 3 was 4, and I still have my 15 in my subtraction sign. So what you should have left is 15 minus 4, and now you need to solve for what 15 minus 4 is. So 15 minus 4 is 11. So 15 minus 12 divided by 3 gave us 11. Okay, I want you to try these two on your board, and I want you to push pause to figure out the answer for both of them. So for this one right here, 2 plus 3 times 7. 2 plus 3 gave me 5, and then we kept our times 7, and that's 35. Over here, you see that we have the same exact numbers, they're just in a different order. So 3 times 7 gave me 21, and if you add 2 to 21, it gave me 23. Okay, moving on to the next page. I want you to write the first equation on your board. 25 minus 10 divided by 5 equals 3. And what we're going to try to do is we're going to put parentheses where they need to go to where this equation is going to equal 3. Okay, so we're going to have to try it two different ways. I want you to take your marker and I want you to put parentheses around 25 minus 10 first. And I want you to solve 25 minus 10, and then I want you to divide that by 5 and see if that gives you 3. Because if it does, then we know that our parentheses need to go right there. So push pause to solve this to see if it equals 3. I know that 25 minus 10 gives me 15, and I know that 15 divided by 15 divided by 5 equals 3. So I'm done. I don't have to change my parentheses around the 10 divided by 5 because I know that that gives me 3. So clear off your board and let's write 3 times 4 divided by 2 equals 6. And we're going to take our marker and we're going to put our parentheses first around the 3 times 4. I want you to push pause and I want you to solve this to see if we put the parentheses in the right place in order for it to equal 6. So I know that 3 times 4 equals 12. And I know if I take this 12 and I divide it by 2, it equals 6. So therefore I have my parentheses in the right place. Clear off your board and write this next equation. 2 times 7 minus 2 equals 10. Take your marker, put the parentheses around 2 times 7, and I want you to solve 2 times 7 and subtract 2 from that answer to see if it gives you 10, to see if we have our parentheses in the right place. Make sure you push pause to do that. I know that 2 times 7 gives me 14, And I know that 14 take away 2 does not equal 10. So that tells me right now that we do not have our parentheses in the right place. So we're going to rewrite the equation, and we're going to put our parentheses in a different spot. This time we're going to take our parentheses and we're going to put it around the 7 minus 2. Now we need to solve 7 minus 2 first and multiply that by 2 to see if it equals 10. So I want you to push pause to do that. I know that 7 minus 2 is 5, and when I take this 5 right here and I multiply it by this 2, it gives me 10. So now we have our parentheses in the right place for this equation. Okay, I want you to clear off your board, and I want you to write this equation on your board. 3 times 4 times 2, and I want you to put parentheses in this equation to make it equal to 24. Push pause to do that. So if I'm starting at the beginning and I do 3 times 4 first, I know that that is 12. And I know that 12 times 2 is the same thing as 2 12s. And I know that 2 12s is equal to 24. So that tells me right there that my parentheses are in the right place. But the reason I put this problem on here is because I want to show you something. I'm going to take these parentheses away, and I'm going to put my parentheses around the 4 times 2. And I know that 4 times 2 is 8. And I know if I take this 8 and I multiply it by 3, it is also going to give me 24. So with this equation, I could have put the parentheses around either one of the ways that I did it, and it still gave me 24. I wanted you to see this because with other equations that we've been working on, we haven't always multiplied in both steps. I have multiplication equations both times that I put my parentheses in there. So when you are multiplying three numbers together, like this one, it doesn't matter the order that you do it, you're still going to get the same answer. So whenever I flip back to this page, you noticed I was subtracting and then I was dividing. I was multiplying and then I was dividing. I was multiplying and subtracting. On all three of these equations, you did not see multiplication as both of the symbols. On this one, you see multiplication and multiplication. This is where you're going to get the same answer no matter where you put your parentheses. Okay, so I want you to think back at what have we learned about the way we use parentheses to group the math and equations. And is it important? Why or why not? So I want you to push pause and I want you to think about the answer to that question. Are parentheses important? Why or why not? Well, from what we learned, parentheses are pretty important because if we do not do what is in parentheses first, then we could get the answer to the equation wrong. The only time that that didn't stand true was whenever the equation included multiplication both times. But all in all, anytime you see parentheses, that is the equation that you need to do first. I want you to take out your problem set. You need to push pause to get that ready. Do that. For the first part of the problem set, you can see that we are just going to solve the equations. Both of these have the same numbers, but you see that the parentheses are just in different parts of the equation. So for A, we have 12 minus 4 plus 6. B has 12 minus 4 plus 6, but we're going to solve them different ways. So for A, we're going to start with subtracting 12 and 4. I know that 12 minus 4 gives me 8. And if I'm taking 8 and I'm adding 6 to that, I get 14. So now we're going to go down here and we're going to solve it a different way. We're going to start with the 4 plus 6. And I know that 4 plus 6 would give me 10. And I know that 12 minus 10 would give me 2. One thing I do want you to do whenever you're doing this is to write the answer to the equation in the parentheses as you do that. So I know that that is the first step that you took. So moving on to C and D, I want you to notice that they have this backwards, where they have the answer first and then the equation over here on this side, but that doesn't matter. They just flipped it around. So this first one, we're going to start with 7 plus 3. And I want you to write the answer underneath that. And I know that 7 plus 3 is 10. So now I'm going to take 15 and I'm going to subtract 10 from that. And that gives me 5. Moving on to D, 15 minus 7. I want you to write the answer for that. We know that that equals 8. And I know that 8 plus 3 is going to give me 11. So what I want you to do is I want you to go and I want you to finish E, F, G, H on this side, and then I want you to come over here and I want you to do I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. And I want you to push pause to complete all of these. And then whenever you are finished, push play so you can check your answers. So on E, we're going to start with 3 plus 2. I know that 3 plus 2 is 5. And I know that 5 times 6 is going to give me 30. Moving on to F, I know that 2 times 6 is 12. And if I'm adding 3 to 12, I know that that's going to give me 15. Moving on to G, 7 minus 2 gives me 5. And if I multiply 4 and 5 together, I get 20. On H, 4 times 7 gives me 28. And I know that 28 take away 2 is going to give me 26. Up here on I, 12 divided by 2 gives me 6. And I know that 6 plus 4 is going to give me 10. I know that 2 plus 4 gives me 6. And I know that 12 divided by 6 gives me 2. On K, 15 divided by 3 gives me 5. And I know that 9 plus 5 gives me 14. I know that 15 plus 9 is going to give me 24. And I know that 24 divided by 3 gives me 8. I know that 10 minus 4 is going to give me 6. And I know that 60 divided by 6 is going to give me 10. I know that 60 divided by 10 gives me 6. And I know that 6 minus 4 gives me 2. On O, 10 divided by 5 is 2. And 35 plus 2 is 37. I know that 35 plus 10 is 45. And I know that 45 divided by 5 is 9. We're going to move on to the next part of the problem set. We did this in the lesson. It says use parentheses to make the equations true. So you're going to have to put parentheses in these equations to make sure they equal what it says that it equals. So for this first one, we've got 16 minus 4 plus 7 equals 19. So I want you to start by putting your parentheses around the 16 minus 4. And I want you to figure out what 16 minus 4 is, add 7 to that, and see if it equals 19. Push pause to do that. I know that 16 minus 4 gives me 12. And I know if I take 12 and I add 7 to 12, it did equal 19. So in this case, my parentheses are in the right spot. Looking at number 2, you see that it's backwards again. They have what it equals in the beginning, but that doesn't matter. We're going to start, and I'm going to put my parentheses around 22 minus 15. So I would like for you to do that. Pause to figure that out. I know that 22 minus 15 is 7, and if I take 7 plus 5, I know that that gives me 12. And what this said right here is that this equation should be equal to 2. So these parentheses are not in the right spot. So we're going to have to erase that, and we're going to have to change our parentheses to go into 15 plus 5. So figure out what 15 plus 5 is, and then I want you to subtract 22 and that number. So I know that 15 plus 5 is 20. So when I take 22 minus 20, that does leave me with 2. So now I have my parentheses in the right spot. Okay, moving on to E. We want this equation to equal 60. So I'm going to start, and we're going to put our parentheses around 3 plus 7. We know that 3 plus 7 is equal to 10, and 10 times 6 does equal 60, so the parentheses are in the right place here. I want you to work on G, and I want you to work on I. I know we're working downwards whenever the way that the letters are labeled. We should be working sideways, but it doesn't really matter the order that we solve these. So push pause to work on G and I. For this equation, we know that it needs to be equal to 5. So if I take 10 times 5, I know that that gives me 50. And when I have 50 divided by 10, I know that that gives me 5. This next one, I'm going to take 26 minus 5 gives me 21. And I know that 21 divided by 7 equals 3. So this is where your parentheses needed to go. Okay, let's move over here to this next one, B. 16 minus 4, let's try that first. I know that 16 take away 4 is going to leave me with 12. And I know that 12 plus 7 is definitely not equal to 5. So I'm going to go and I'm going to erase that. And I'm going to try my parentheses around the 4 plus 7. I know that 4 plus 7 is 11. And I know that if I take 16 and I take 11 away from that, it gives me 5. So now I have my parentheses in the right place. I want you to go ahead and finish D, F, H, and J. I want you to notice that there is some big numbers in H, but if I have 100 divided by 10, that's the same thing as saying, how many times am I going to skip count by tens until I get to 100? And everyone can skip count by tens pretty easily. So when you get here, don't say, whoa, that's a really big number, because you can still do it. So push pause to complete these, and then push play whenever you're ready to check your answers. For this equation, I'm going to start with 22 minus 15. And I know that that is equal to 7, and I know that 7 plus 5 is equal to 12, so this is where the parentheses need to go. Down here, 7 times 6 gave me 42, and I know that 42 and 3 added together gives me 45, so your parentheses need to go around the 7 times 6. I know that 100 divided by 10 is 10, because I can count by tens 10 times to get to 100. And I know that 10 times 5 gives me 50. So this is where your parentheses needed to go for this equation. When I looked at this one, I knew that I wasn't going to start with 4 times 25 because we haven't learned how to do that yet. So 25 minus 16 will give me 9. And I know if I take 4 times 9, that gives me 36. So these are all the correct answers for number 2 on your problem set. We're going to move on to the back side of your problem set. Mine looks a little blurry, but that's just the way I took the picture for it. Number 3 says, the teacher writes 24 divided by 4 plus 2 equals blank on the board. Chad says it equals 8, and Samir says it equals 4. Explain how placing the parentheses in the equation can make both answers true. For this one, what I want you to do is I want you to write 24 divided by 4 plus 2 times in this white space on your paper. And then I want you to put parentheses around 24 divided by 4. And then I want you to put parentheses the other way and put it around 4 plus 2. And I want you to solve both of those ways and see if one answer gives you 8 and one answer gives you 4. And I want you to push pause to do that. So, whenever I take that and I write both equations, the answer can equal 8 and the answer can equal 4. Because if I'm taking 24 divided by 4, I know that that gives me 6. And I know that right here, 6 plus 2 gave me 8. I also know that if I take 24 divided by 4 plus 2 and I do 4 plus 2 first, that's 6. So now I'm taking 24 divided by 6 and that equals 4. So it didn't really ask you if both students were correct, but in this case you can work this out and get 8 and get 4. But the main thing I wanted to see on your paper were the equations, letting me know that you could get 8 and you could get 4. It didn't have to look exactly like how I put it on here, as long as you had the equations. So I want you to move down to number 4. Natasha solves the equation below by finding the sum of 5 and 12. Place the parentheses around the equation to show her thinking, and then solve. So, this tells me right here that Natasha is doing 5 plus 12. But we have to figure out, how did Natasha go from 12 plus 15 divided by 3 to get 5 plus 12? And you're going to have to put parentheses in this equation to get yourself to 5 plus 12. So I want you to do that right now. I know that if I'm going to put parentheses around 12 plus 5, I know that this is going to give me 27. And that would leave me with 27 divided by 3. And that is not 5 plus 12. So, parentheses are not going to go there. So now I'm going to try 15 divided by 3. And I know that 15 divided by 3 gives me 5. And now I have left 12 plus 5. I want you to notice that this says 12 plus 5 and this says 5 plus 12. But those mean the same thing. It doesn't matter what order they're in. So on your piece of paper, you should have had your parentheses around the 15 divided by 3, because that is what is going to get you to 5 and 12 added together. Then the last part of this problem said, then solve it. So now all we have to do is figure out what is the sum of 5 and 12 together, and you need to write it right here on the line. So when I take 12 plus 5 and I add it together, I get 17. Okay, we're going to move on to number 5. It says find all the possible answers to the expression 7 plus 3 times 2 by placing parentheses around different numbers. So all you need to do right now is you need to write 7 plus 3 times 2 times, put parentheses both ways you could put it in that equation, and solve both ways. I want you to push pause to do that. So this is what I was looking for. 7 plus 3 times 2, putting the parentheses around the 7 plus 3 first, and that would have taken us to 10 times 2, and it's going to equal 20. Next way, you could have done 7 plus 3 times 2 by putting the parentheses around the 3 times 2, and that left us with 7 plus 6, which equals 13. Okay, exit ticket, you have this in your binder. I want you to complete this and bring it to me once you are finished.